In the summer of 1968, a young woman vanished from a California campground under circumstances so disturbing that official reports remained sealed for decades. What investigators discovered challenged every assumption about missing person cases and left questions that continue to haunt those who know the truth. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button for more unexplained mysteries. It was July 23, 1968, late in the afternoon, when 22-year-old Kathy Morgan arrived at Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park in Monterey County, California. The redwood groves stretched endlessly into the coastal mountains, their ancient trunks disappearing into perpetual twilight beneath the canopy. Kathy had driven alone from her apartment in San Francisco, seeking solitude after a difficult breakup with her longtime boyfriend. Park Ranger William Davies logged her arrival at 4:30 that afternoon. His records described a petite woman with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a blue hiking jacket and carrying a small backpack. She requested Campsite 14, an isolated spot near Pfeiffer Creek, despite Davies suggesting she might prefer the more populated areas closer to the visitor center. Kathy insisted on the remote location, explaining she needed complete quiet to think. The first sign something was amiss came the following morning when campers at nearby sites reported hearing what sounded like a woman crying throughout the night. The sounds weren't consistent with normal distress, but rather a rhythmic, almost musical weeping that seemed to move through the forest canopy above the trees. Several witnesses described the voice as traveling in slow circles around the campground, never touching the ground. When Kathy failed to check out by noon as scheduled, Ranger Davies hiked to Campsite 14 to investigate. What he found defied immediate explanation. The campsite appeared undisturbed, with Kathy's tent properly erected and her belongings neatly arranged inside. Her sleeping bag remained zipped and unused, though a small indentation suggested someone had sat on its surface for an extended period. The most puzzling discovery was a series of identical wet footprints leading from the tent to the creek's edge. The prints were definitely human, matching the size and tread pattern of Kathy's hiking boots, but they appeared fresh despite the dry weather that had persisted for over a week. More disturbing was their depth and clarity, as if each step had been made with tremendous deliberation and weight. Davies followed the trail to where Pfeiffer Creek curved sharply around a massive fallen redwood. The footprints ended abruptly at the water's edge, but the creek at that point was barely ankle-deep and only 3 feet wide. On the opposite bank, the forest floor showed no corresponding tracks or disturbance of any kind. Local search and rescue teams arrived within hours, led by veteran tracker Robert Chen. Chen's team discovered additional anomalies that complicated the search parameters. Approximately 50 yards upstream from where the footprints ended, they found Kathy's hiking boots placed side by side on a large boulder in the middle of the creek. The boots were completely dry, inside and out, despite their location in the flowing water. Inside the right boot, searchers discovered a handwritten note in Kathy's distinctive handwriting. The message consisted of a single line: "The water here remembers everything that was lost." Below this cryptic statement, she had drawn what appeared to be a rough map showing the creek's path, but with tributaries and bends that didn't match the actual geography of the area. Chen's tracking dogs exhibited unusual behavior throughout the search. The animals would follow Kathy's scent trail enthusiastically until reaching the creek, where they would suddenly become agitated and refuse to continue. Several dogs whimpered and backed away from the water, their hackles raised as if confronting an invisible threat. As the search expanded, investigators uncovered a pattern of similar disappearances dating back to the early 1900s. Forest Service archives contained records of at least 7 people who had vanished near Pfeiffer Creek under comparable circumstances. Each case involved a solitary individual who left behind pristine campsites and mysterious wet footprints leading to the water's edge. More troubling was the discovery that local Basilan tribe members had traditionally avoided this particular stretch of creek. referring to it in their oral histories as a place where the boundary grows thin. Tribal elder Maria Santos, when approached by investigators, reluctantly explained that her ancestors spoke of nights when voices from beneath the water would call to those walking alone in the forest. The investigation took a darker turn when rangers examined Kathy's belongings more thoroughly. Her journal, found in the tent, contained entries from her 3-day drive from San Francisco that grew increasingly erratic as she approached Big Sur. The final entry, dated the night she arrived, described hearing her own voice calling to her from the direction of the creek, speaking words she claimed she had never said but somehow recognized. Most unsettling was her description of the water's appearance after sunset. According to the journal, when viewed in moonlight, the creek revealed what she termed impossible depths, as if the shallow stream opened into vast underwater chambers filled with swaying figures that moved without creating any current or disturbance on the surface. Search teams working the area after dark reported their own disturbing experiences. Multiple witnesses described hearing conversations carried on the night breeze, always just beyond the range of clear understanding. The voices seemed to emerge from the creek itself, creating an acoustic effect that made it impossible to determine their exact source or direction. Equipment malfunctions plagued the official search effort. Flashlights would dim or fail entirely when pointed towards certain sections of the creek, while functioning normally everywhere else. Radio communications experienced consistent interference near the water, with transmissions often interrupted by what sounded like whispered fragments of speech in an unknown language. On the 4th night of searching, Ranger Davies was conducting a solo patrol when he witnessed something that fundamentally altered his understanding of the case. While crossing the creek on a fallen log, his flashlight beam penetrated the water and revealed what appeared to be a vast underwater forest extending far below the actual creek bed. Among the submerged trees, humanoid figures stood motionless, their faces turned upward toward the surface. Davies later testified that one of the figures bore an unmistakable resemblance to Kathy Morgan, though her features appeared somehow altered, as if viewed through layers of moving water. When he attempted to shine his light directly on the apparition, the vision dissolved, leaving only the familiar shallow creek bed visible beneath the surface. The search was officially suspended after 10 days, with Kathy Morgan classified as a missing person, presumed dead. However, the case file contains reports of ongoing phenomena that continued for months after her disappearance. Campers reported seeing a woman matching Kathy's description walking along the creek at twilight, always just far enough away that positive identification remained impossible. These sightings followed a disturbing pattern. Witnesses described the figure as moving with an unnatural gait, as if walking underwater despite being clearly visible above the surface. Those who attempted to approach or call out found their voices would produce no sound, as if the air itself had become too thick to carry noise. The most chilling development came 6 months after Kathy's disappearance, when her former boyfriend received a package with no return address. Inside was a collection of photographs that appeared to have been taken during her camping trip, despite no camera being found among her belongings. The images showed familiar locations around Campsite 14, but with subtle wrongness that defied explanation. Trees appeared in different positions from shot to shot, shadows fell at impossible angles, and several photographs showed what looked like additional tents and camping equipment that had never been reported by searchers. Most disturbing was a series of images taken apparently from beneath the surface of Pfeiffer Creek, looking upward through the water at figures standing on the bank. These underwater photographs revealed details of the creek bottom that didn't match the known topography. The images showed carved stone structures and what appear to be ancient symbols etched into rock formations that geological surveys insisted couldn't exist in that location. Among these ruins, human figures could be seen standing in perfect stillness, their faces obscured by the water's distortion. The final photograph in the collection showed Kathy herself, standing waist-deep in the creek with her arms extended toward the camera. Her expression was one of profound recognition, as if she had finally understood something that had eluded her throughout her life. Behind her, barely visible in the photograph's depth of field, dozens of other figures stood in similar poses, creating a gathering that extended far beyond the creek's actual boundaries. Analysis of the photographs by forensic experts yielded contradictory results. The images showed no signs of manipulation or double exposure, yet they contained elements that couldn't possibly exist. Water damage patterns suggested the pictures had been submerged for extended periods, though they remained perfectly clear and undamaged. Forest Service officials quietly implemented new policies restricting solo camping in the Pfeiffer Creek area, though the official reasoning cited wildlife safety concerns rather than the true nature of the restriction. Rangers received instructions to discourage visitors from approaching the creek after sunset and to report any unusual acoustic phenomena or equipment malfunctions immediately. The case files remained classified until 1993, when Freedom of Information requests forced their limited release. Even the declassified versions contained extensive redactions, particularly regarding witness statements from tribal members and details of the photographic evidence. Several key documents referenced in the investigation summary were withheld entirely, classified under environmental protection statutes that don't typically apply to missing person cases. Recent satellite imagery of the Pfeiffer Creek area reveals topographical anomalies that don't appear on any official geological surveys. The creek's path seems to shift subtly between different imaging sessions, suggesting either equipment malfunction or changes in the landscape that occur too rapidly for natural geological processes. Local researchers who have attempted to investigate the site independently report equipment failures and disorientation that mirrors the experiences of the original search teams. Digital cameras produce images with unexplained visual artifacts, while GPS devices frequently lose signal accuracy near the water. Several investigators have described feeling an overwhelming urge to enter the creek, accompanied by the sensation of being called by familiar voices. The most recent development in the case occurred just 3 years ago, when maintenance workers draining a section of Pfeiffer Creek for routine repairs discovered a collection of personal items buried in the sediment. Among these artifacts were pieces of camping equipment dating from the 1960s through the present day, suggesting a pattern of disappearances that continued long after official investigations ceased. DNA analysis of fabric samples found in the creek bed matched genetic material from Kathy Morgan's personal effects, though the condition of the material suggested it had been preserved in an environment completely unlike the creek's known characteristics. The fabric showed none of the deterioration expected from decades of exposure to flowing water and sediment. What do you think really happened to Kathy Morgan in those ancient redwood groves, and what force could preserve evidence for decades beneath that deceptively shallow creek? Share your theories in the comments and subscribe to explore more cases where the natural world conceals truths too strange for official explanation.